I heard my husband's voice before I could open my eyes. "She's not going to recover the way she was," he said, low, careful, like he'd rehearsed it. "The doctor said there could be permanent damage. We need to think about next steps." My mother-in-law answered without missing a beat. "I know a realtor." The machines breathed for me. My body was cement, but my mind was completely awake, recording every word. "Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm 32 years old, and the man I married 6 years ago was standing in my hospital room talking about selling our house while I was still attached to a ventilator." Let me back up. 11 days before that conversation, I collapsed in the parking lot of my own office. A brain hemorrhage what the doctors later described as a thunderclap event. Here 1 second, gone the next. I was a UX designer at a mid-sized tech firm in Austin. I had a mortgage I'd paid on time for 4 years, a retirement account I'd been quietly building since I was 24, and a storage unit across town that my husband didn't know existed. That last part matters. I'll get back to it. My husband and I had been struggling for about a year before the hemorrhage. Nothing dramatic, no screaming matches, no affairs as far as I knew. Just a slow erosion. He'd quit his job in sales the previous spring, promising he was figuring out his next move. His next move, from what I could tell, was watching sports and borrowing money from his mother. I'd started keeping separate accounts, not because I was planning to leave, but because I'd grown up watching my own mother lose everything in a divorce with no financial footprint of her own. I wasn't going to be that woman. So I had accounts he didn't know about, and I had that storage unit. When I really woke up, enough to speak, I said nothing about what I'd heard. My husband leaned over the hospital bed with the exact right expression, worried, devoted. He squeezed my hand. "You scared me so much," he said. I looked at him and thought, I know what you said to your mother. "What happened to our house?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. "Weak." He blinked. "Don't worry about any of that right now." "I'm not worried," I said. "I just want to know." He shifted his weight. "Mom's been helping me manage things while you were out. There were bills coming in. We made some decisions to keep us afloat." Decisions. Plural. I nodded slowly, let my eyelids flutter like the medication was pulling me under. He relaxed, patted my hand. That night when he went to the cafeteria, I asked the night nurse if I could use her phone charger. Then I lay in the dark and started making calls. Not to friends, not to family, to my accountant. What I found out over the next 72 hours turned my blood cold, and I was already hooked up to machines monitoring exactly how cold my blood could get. In the 19 days I'd been unconscious, my husband had invoked emergency spousal authority to access our joint accounts, completely legal. But he hadn't stopped there. He'd contacted our mortgage lender and initiated a distressed sale process, citing medical hardship. He'd listed our house while I was still in the ICU. And he'd done it for $68,000 below market value to a buyer his mother had sourced with a closing date set for 3 weeks out. He'd also sold my car and posted a GoFundMe. The GoFundMe was the part that broke something open in my chest. He posted a photo of me, one from our wedding, smiling sun in my hair, and written 3 paragraphs about how devastating it had been to watch his wife fight for her life, how the medical bills were mounting, how he was doing everything he could to keep their family together. The campaign had raised $43,000. My private health insurance had already approved full coverage of my hospital stay. I'd set it up through my employer the year I turned 27, specifically because I'd watched my college roommate get destroyed by a medical billing crisis she never fully recovered from. My out-of-pocket maximum was $1,500. He knew this. He had been on my insurance as a dependent for 6 years. I read the comments on his GoFundMe. "Such a devoted husband. She's lucky to have you. Praying for your family." The top donor had given $500, a woman I recognized as his mother's friend from church. I set the phone face down on my chest and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Pain is clarifying in a way nothing else is. Lying there with the drainage port still in my skull and stitches along my scalp, I felt everything I might have cried about. The betrayal, the humiliation, the grief of it, compressed into something cold and usable. I didn't cry. I made a list. The storage unit was 12 miles from our house, in a climate-controlled facility off Ben White Boulevard. I'd rented it under my maiden name, paid annually in cash, and told no one. Inside it, 2 fireproof filing boxes, a laptop with encrypted drives, and a lockbox containing physical copies of every financial document I considered critical. My grandmother's life insurance payout, left directly to me, not to our household. The deed to a small piece of land in East Texas that my grandfather had left me, the original paperwork for 3 investment accounts in my name only, and the sealed envelope I'd labeled simply, "In case." I'd set all of that up 18 months ago, right around the time my husband started his figuring it out phase. Not because I thought I'd need it, but because I was someone who planned for weather she hoped would never come. The weather had come. Step 1. I called my college friend who was now a family law attorney in Dallas. I told her everything in a single 20-minute conversation. She went quiet for a moment after I finished. "Lauren," she said, "this is textbook financial exploitation of an incapacitated spouse. In Texas, that's both civil and criminal exposure." "I know," I said. "Where do I start?" Step 2. I contacted the buyer of our house, not as myself, not yet. I had my attorney send a letter identifying a potential title issue requiring documentation review before closing. Under Texas property law, a distress sale executed under spousal authority while the other spouse was medically incapacitated and had not provided written consent creates a contestable transfer, particularly when misrepresentation of financial distress can be demonstrated. The buyer's closing attorney called my attorney within 24 hours. They did not want a title dispute. Step 3. I called the storage facility and confirmed my unit was untouched. Of course it was. My husband didn't know it existed. By the time I was discharged, pale, moving carefully, a little slower than I used to be, I had a plan with 7 distinct steps and a folder of documentation my husband didn't know I'd assembled. He picked me up from the hospital. He held my hand in the elevator. He bought flowers, the kind I'd always told him I liked, pale yellow tulips, and put them on the kitchen counter of the house he was in the process of selling out from under me. "I just want you to rest," he told me. "Everything is handled." "Handled," I repeated. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked around at the space I'd spent 4 years making into something I loved, the open shelving I'd installed myself, the backsplash I'd picked out on a Saturday morning when we still did things together. "Tell me what that means." He sat across from me and explained, in the patient tone of someone explaining something to a child, that the house had been listed due to financial pressure, that there was a buyer in place, and that he thought it would be best for us to downsize anyway. "A fresh start," he said, "after everything I'd been through." He did not mention the GoFundMe. I did not mention that I knew about it. "Okay," I said. I let my voice sound tired. "I trust you." He exhaled. That was his first mistake, believing me. 2 days later, while he was out, I drove to the storage unit. I sat on the floor of that small, climate-controlled room, surrounded by filing boxes, and let myself have exactly 15 minutes of feeling the full weight of what had happened. Then I opened the sealed envelope marked, "In case." Inside was a document I'd had notarized 18 months ago, a statement of my separate property assets, witnessed by 2 people, time-stamped, with a clause I'd added at my attorney friend's suggestion after a late-night conversation about worst-case scenarios. The clause stated that in the event of my incapacitation, any liquidation of assets explicitly identified as separate property, including the East Texas land in the 3 individual investment accounts, without my written consent, would constitute unauthorized disposition of property. It also referenced a Texas statute I'd looked up on my own time, the one covering financial exploitation of a disabled or incapacitated individual. I put the envelope in my bag. I drove home. I made dinner. He came in around 7, smelling like he'd been at a bar. He kissed my cheek and called me babe and asked how I was feeling. "Better every day," I said. I was better every day. I was better in the specific way that a person gets better when they have a target. The GoFundMe broke publicly a week after I was discharged. I hadn't planned for it to happen that fast, but one of my coworkers, a woman named No One, you need to know, A quiet person who'd always paid attention had noticed that the campaign was still actively soliciting donations even after my company's HR department had sent out a note saying I was recovering and would return to work on a modified schedule. She'd done some digging, found that our insurance had covered the stay, posted a comment on the campaign asking, gently but publicly, where the funds were going, given that the medical expenses appeared to be covered. The comment got 43 replies in 6 hours. My husband took the campaign down within the hour, but screenshots lie forever and the internet has a long memory for exactly this kind of thing. My phone lit up with messages. People who donated wanted answers. 2 local journalists had picked up the thread. A Facebook group for Austin Community News had a thread with over 200 comments. My husband called me frantic from wherever he was. "Lauren, this is spiraling. You need to say something. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop, watching his name light up my screen. I let it ring. Then I called my attorney and told her it was time to file. The civil suit went in the following Monday. Fraudulent misrepresentation, unauthorized disposition of separate property, financial exploitation of an incapacitated individual. My attorney also filed an emergency motion to halt the house sale pending resolution, citing the title issue and the active litigation. The closing was suspended within 48 hours. My husband didn't find out until the buyer's attorney called him. He came home that evening and I was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a book I wasn't really reading. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. "What did you do?" he said. I looked up. "I protected what's mine." "Lauren, we are married. What's mine is yours and what's yours is..." "Separate property in Texas," I said, "is not subject to spousal disposition without written consent, especially when that disposition occurs while the property owner is medically incapacitated and cannot provide informed agreement." I turned a page of my book. My attorney can explain the rest. The silence in that kitchen was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. He tried everything. He tried wounded. I was trying to keep us afloat. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. He tried angry. He went behind my back. "You hid money from me? You've been planning this for months." He tried tender. "Lauren, come on. It's us. We can work this out." He stood in the kitchen of the house he'd tried to sell and cycled through every version of himself, looking for the one that would work on me. None of them worked anymore. The GoFundMe investigation moved faster than I expected. Once the screenshots spread, 2 of the larger donors contacted the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division directly. That got the attention of a county investigator who reached out to my attorney, who provided the insurance documentation showing full coverage had been in place. $43,000 solicited under false claims of medical financial hardship, deposited into an account my husband shared with his mother. His mother, it turned out, had helped write the campaign copy. Court is not like it is on television. There's no dramatic music. There's no moment where someone breaks down crying and confesses everything. There are documents. There are timestamps. There are bank records that do not have feelings and do not forget. The judge reviewed everything with the expression of someone who had seen variations of this particular story many times before and had grown very tired of it. The GoFundMe funds, full restitution ordered, plus civil penalties for fraudulent solicitation. The house sale voided. The property reverted to my name, since it had been purchased before our marriage with a down payment sourced from my premarital savings account, a fact I had documented, because I document things. My car, my husband was ordered to return the sale proceeds. The 3 investment accounts and the East Texas land, never legally accessible to him in the first place, but the court formalized that in writing anyway. I appreciated the clarity. Criminal referral opened by the county DA's office for financial exploitation of a disabled individual and fraudulent solicitation of charitable funds. When the ruling was read, my husband sat very still beside his attorney. His mother, in the row behind him, put her hand over her mouth. I looked straight ahead. After the hearing, my husband waited for me in the hallway. His attorney had already left. He looked smaller than I remembered him being, though I knew that wasn't possible. People don't physically shrink. They just reveal the size they actually were. "Lauren," he said, I don't know how it got here." "I do," I said. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to say something else. To give him a thread to pull, an opening, a maybe. There wasn't one. You heard me talking to my mother, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. In the hospital, you were awake. I was always awake, I said. I just wasn't able to move. He was quiet for a moment. I really thought you might not. But I did, I said, and I'd already planned for the possibility that you might do something like this, not because I knew you would, but because I know how people behave when they think there are no consequences. I picked up my bag. He didn't move to stop me. I hope you get the help you need, I said. And I meant it, the way you mean something that costs you nothing anymore. Genuinely. I walked out into the Texas afternoon, squinting against the sun. My car was in the lot. The house was mine. The land in East Texas had never stopped being mine. The investment accounts were growing quietly in 3 separate institutions, the way I'd set them up to do. The storage unit I decided I would keep, not because I needed it anymore, but because it reminded me of the version of myself who had been scared enough and smart enough to prepare. There's a particular kind of loneliness in having planned for your own worst-case scenario. It means some part of you always knew. You lived with that knowledge quietly, tucked away like a fireproof box, hoping you'd never need to open it. I'd needed to open it, and everything inside was exactly where I'd left it. I drove home with the windows down, took the long way through the neighborhood I'd chosen, because I'd loved the trees. The oaks on my street had been there for 60 years and would be there for 60 more. They didn't care about any of this. They were just standing in the ground, doing what they'd always done. I parked in my driveway, sat for a minute. Then I went inside and made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the table I'd bought, in the house I'd paid for. That was mine. And I thought about what it meant to have survived not just the hemorrhage, but everything that came after it. The doctors had told me recovery would take months, that I'd have days when my vision blurred, days when words came slowly, days when I'd need to be patient with myself in ways I wasn't used to. They were right. I had all of those days. But I also had this. I had come back from something that was supposed to erase me, and instead of finding nothing, I'd found exactly what I'd hidden there for myself. Proof, documentation, a sealed envelope with my own name on it. And the knowledge that I had known, somewhere in the back of my careful, prepared, underestimated mind, that I was worth protecting. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, set it on the shelf I'd built with my own hands. Then I opened my laptop and got back to work. There's something I've thought about a lot since everything happened, the fact that the storage unit existed before any of this did. I didn't rent it because I knew my husband would do what he did. I rented it because I understood, somewhere quiet and practical inside myself, that the world doesn't always wait for you to be ready, that emergencies don't announce themselves, that the person who survives isn't always the strongest one in the room. It's usually the one who thought ahead when everyone else was comfortable. That's the thing no one talks about when they tell women to trust their partners, trust their families, trust that love is enough. Love is real. But love doesn't protect a deed. Love doesn't show up in a bank timestamp. Love doesn't sit in a fireproof box waiting for you to need it. What protected me was a decision I made on an ordinary Tuesday, 18 months before I collapsed in that parking lot. No drama, no premonition, just me, sitting at my kitchen table thinking, what would I need if I couldn't speak for myself, and then doing the work to answer that question. That's what I want people to take from what happened to me. Not bitterness toward my husband, not a lesson about marriage or betrayal, but this, preparation is an act of integrity. Taking care of your future self, even when your present self feels safe, is one of the most honest things you can do. It's saying I take my own life seriously enough to protect it. And then there's the other side of it. What happened to him? I've had people ask me if I feel guilty, if I think the outcome was too harsh, and I always pause on that because I want to answer honestly. He made a series of choices, each one compounding the last. He heard the words, "Your wife may not recover," and his first instinct was to calculate what that meant for him financially. He drafted a fundraising campaign while I was still unconscious. He signed documents he had no right to sign. None of those things happened to him. He chose them. Step by step, each one a little further from the person I thought I'd married. The consequences that followed were just the math of those choices catching up. That's not cruelty, that's accountability. And accountability is what makes any of this mean something. I think about the version of me who woke up with nothing. No documentation, no storage unit, no sealed envelope. I think about how easily that could have been real, and how many people it is real for right now who didn't know to prepare, who trusted fully, held nothing back, built everything together with someone who turned out to see it all as leverage. I got lucky, not because things worked out, but because past me had been disciplined enough to give present me a fighting chance. If you take anything from this, let it be that. Know what you own. Document it. Build something that belongs to you alone, not out of distrust, but out of self-respect. And if the day comes when you need it, you'll be grateful to the version of yourself who was brave enough to be honest about what the world can sometimes look like. I still have the storage unit. I renewed the lease last month.